video, we are going to work on naming acids. Well, first of all, what is an acid? There are many different definitions of acids, but what we're going to work with today is what's called the Bronsted definition of an acid, which is that it is a proton donor. And a proton is nothing more than a hydrogen with a +1 charge. If it has a +1 charge, it lost its 1 electron that it had, so all that's left with an H+ is a proton. So if I say the word proton or H+, I'm talking about the same thing. So acids, right now, you're going to be able to recognize them with an H out front. Okay, so here all of these are acids. Notice the H out front, that's a telltale sign. Well, to name this acid, it's a hydrogen and 1 nonmetal. And kind of the formula for doing that is you say hydro, and then it's an ic, and then acid. So this is a chlorine, so it's hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid, HCl. You need to know that one. HBr, hydrobromic acid. HI, hydroiodic acid. Notice in all of these acids there's 1 proton, 1 H out front, and 1 nonmetal. And so you name it by saying hydroic acid. And then you just insert the name of the nonmetal. Okay, sometimes they call these binary acids because there are only 2 atoms in the acid. All right, but a lot of acids have oxygen in them, and they're called oxyacids. So in addition to the hydrogen, we've got an oxygen and a nonmetal. And so let's learn how to name these. All right, first of all, if you know your polyatomic ions, it's going to be so much easier. All right, NO3 with a -1 charge is called nitrate. I hope you're learning these. All right, if we're going to make it an acid, we're going to put protons out front, and the protons have a +1 charge, and we want the charge to balance. So we want the positives and the negatives to balance. So because it's -1, I'm going to need 1 H+. So I just put 1 H out front, H, NO3, and that's nitric acid. If your polyatomic ion ended in 8, the acid is going to end in ic. So this is nitrate, this is nitric acid, nitric acid. Again, another acid that I want you to know. This polyatomic ion is sulfate. It has a -2 charge. So to make it neutral, we're going to have to add 2 H's to the front of it. So H2SO4, it ended in 8, so it's sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid. Here we have a common polyatomic ion. I think you're learning it. It's acetate. It has a -1 charge, so 1 hydrogen goes out front. And now we've got acetic acid. PO4 with a -3 charge is phosphate. Phosphate, we're going to put 3 hydrogens in front of that to neutralize that -3 charge. It was phosphate, so now it's phosphoric acid. I want you to know all of these polyatomic ions, and I want you to know the acid names as well. If you know one, knowing the other comes pretty easily. All right, I have a few more. Let's go ahead with this one, ClO3 with a -1 charge. That's called chlorate. That polyatomic ion is chlorate. Put 1 hydrogen out front because of that -1 charge, and we've got chloric acid. All right, but not all polyatomic ions end in ate. Some of them end in the ending ite, I-T-E. So here's an example. ClO2 with a -1 charge is chlorite. Notice 1 less oxygen turns the ate to an ite in the polyatomic ion. 1 hydrogen out front to turn it to an acid, and the ite becomes an us acid. So HClO2 is chlorus acid, chlorus acid. NO2 with a -1 charge is nitrite. The ite becomes an us, so this is nitrous acid. SO3 with a -2 charge is a sulfite. So H2, again we need 2 hydrogens out front, would be sulfurous acid. Okay, so if your polyatomic ion ends in 8, it becomes an ic acid. I like to think of it like, oh, I ate too much, I got sick. 8, ic. If it ends in "ite," if the polyatomic ion ends in "ite," it's an "us" ending for the acid. And I don't have any good way to remember that. All right, now let's just practice. What if you were asked to name these acids using these rules that we just looked at? Well, looking at our first one, it's binary. It's one nonmetal with a hydrogen. And so that was a hydroic acid. So this would be hydro something ic acid. And that's a fluorine. So this is going to be a hydrofluoric acid. Okay? Again, notice it's just one nonmetal with the hydrogen. Well, here we've got a polyatomic ion. It's not just one nonmetal. And the polyatomic ion was CO3 with a -2 charge. Do you remember which polyatomic ion that is? That is carbonate. It's a good one to remember. Carbonate. Well, when we turned it into an acid by putting 2 protons out front, it is now carbonic, because it ended in 8, carbonic acid. So, in summary, if you have one nonmetal and a proton out front, or a hydrogen out front, it's a binary acid, and you're going to use the formula hydroic acid. Hydrochloric acid, hydrofluoric, hydrobromic, hydroiodic. We can keep going. Okay, if you have a polyatomic ion that ended in 8 that has now become an acid by putting those protons out front, the 8 ending turns into the ic acid. So sulfate becomes sulfuric acid, or acetate becomes acetic acid. And if that polyatomic ion ended in an ite, the ending for the acid is us. So a nitrite would be nitrous acid, or a sulfite would be sulfurous acid. Okay, well, we're going to practice naming acids in class. Bye.